Hello, this is Mike Van Meter, and welcome to the Recovery is Possible podcast. I want to thank you for joining me. You can reach us at our Facebook site, which is also called Recovery is Possible, or our website, which is vanmeterwellnesssolutions.com. This podcast exists to educate the public about addiction, remove the stigma associated with addiction, and offer help and support to those suffering from addiction. And so today we're going to be talking with Brendan McDonough, who is the lone survivor of the Yarnell Hill fire tragedy in 2013. Today, he's a public speaker and works with numerous nonprofits for veterans, police officers, firefighters, and emergency medical services, and he lives in Prescott, Arizona. And this is exciting for me because we've been trying to link up now for quite some time, and I understand that Brendan's a very busy guy with some of the work that he's going to talk about today. But for those of you that aren't familiar with Brendan, he was the subject of, and his crew, the 19 folks that perished, subject of a movie, a Hollywood movie that came out. It was released by Columbia Pictures. And in the story, his story, actually, he was on the verge of being a hopeless heroin addict. And then he joined the Granite Mountain Hotshots out of Prescott, Arizona. And he was brought on by the Superintendent Eric Marsh, who's depicted in the movie as well. And on June 30th of 2013, McDonough was serving as the lookout, and it was a tragic fire that killed 19 of his co-workers, his brothers. And the significance of that, other than just being a horrific tragedy, is that's the largest number of firefighters that have perished in one day since 9/11. And after that, Brendan suffered from bouts of depression and PTSD, and really worked through that, and is doing a lot of work to address not only those issues within himself, but helping others as well. And so we've got Brendan on the show today, and he's going to talk to us about the tragedy, what led to that. But being a recovery podcast, I really wanted to focus on Brendan himself and his past and his addictions and his issues, and how he recovered from that, or is in recovery from that, I should say. So with that, Brendan, thank you for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate the opportunity. It means a lot.
Well, you're in a position to do a lot of really help the people that are out there suffering today. This is a very weird time for our first responders in the nation. In fact, as we speak, we have more riots occurring due to an incident that happened in the last couple of days up in Minnesota. And I just know that in the work that I do and the work that you do, this is just we're gonna be busy for a while, because it's not only trauma for the nation, but for the people that are out in the front lines every single day. So with that said, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and really just kind of how did we end up here today? How is it that we're talking today?
Yeah, definitely. So, starting out at a young age, I started using drugs and alcohol at about 13. And it really progressed throughout high school. It started with a little bit of drinking, a little bit of pot, and kind of climaxed after I graduated. I wanted to be a firefighter, but I was kind of living this double standard life of partying, and cocaine came in the mix, and prescription pills, and I was trapped, and I really didn't realize it until the day I tried to quit. And it was tough. I was in college, but still using and trying to get my life together. And, like most young kids, just a lot of peer pressure and a lot of misguidance and lack of guidance and family support. And so when I graduated the fire academy, it was time to, do some schoolwork and enroll in my EMT class. And man, Michael, I flunked out of that so quick just because I had no comprehension of actually studying. Everything that I had learned was all through muscle memory of being hands-on. And so when it came time to sit in front of a book, I flunked out. And for me, I kind of took that as a sign of like, okay, well, maybe that's not what I'm supposed to do. So I kept diving deeper into drugs. And I found myself in the summer 2010 just really out there and not working and not going to school and making new friends that were into drugs and, were suffering from that disease. But at that age, I wasn't willing to listen to nobody. And so I was arrested Christmas of 2011, like 2 days before Christmas, and was facing a few felony charges. And it was a huge wake up because I had a kid on the way, and I'm going to be a dad. I'm 19 and I am about as lost gets. And I remember getting out and I was given a second chance. And I remember staying sober for about like 2 weeks. And I didn't know what meetings were. I didn't know what recovery programs were. I had no clue about any of that. Right. And so that was a real struggle for me. And so I thought, okay, what's the next best thing? So I get back into school. And so I start looking at this EMT class and I'm like, I want to be a firefighter. I need to be a dad and I need to give back to the community. And I want to be of service to others because I know how well that does for the heart and soul. And so as I was going through this EMT class, I kind of held out being sober, 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And, I was passing my test and I found myself once again around the same people. And those people, places, and things started to pop back up, and I found myself using again. And it wasn't until kind of the second half of that semester, I had overheard some guys talking about an opening on a hotshot crew. I remember thinking to myself, that's what I want to do. I want to be a hotshot. Just the term alone, right? Just a 19-year-old kid, arrogant and cocky, right? And just thinking like, that's what I want to do. And they weren't talking to me though, because it's a small town, right? And so I just overheard them. And so I showed up that next morning and I walked in, and just like the movie shows, it was not a warm welcome. It was like, what are you doing here? You don't belong here, pretty much. And I remember going to leave, and the Superintendent Eric Marsh caught me at the door. And, he said, hey, what's going on? How can I help you? And I said, well, I just want to drop off my resume, but it sounds like you're full. He goes, well, I've got one open slot. Can you do an interview? And in my head, I'm thinking, next week, it was Friday, come back on a Monday or something. I'm like, yeah, of course. And mind you, I'm in a tank top and jeans. I'm going to go do some random side construction work. So it's the early morning. And he goes, all right, well, come sit down. And I remember my heart dropped. I'm like, holy cow, this is real. And so we start going through these interview questions, and I'm a pretty good talker, and so I'm talking my way out of this question and that question, but facts are facts. And so when we get to the criminal history, if I lie, they're going to find out. HR is going to find out. They're going to know. And I'd rather be known for being truthful at this point in time in my life. Like, why not do something different? Right. And my daughter was just born, and I'm trying to make a difference in her life and my life. And so I told them, I said, hey, I've got this felony charge, and if I complete probation, it'll be gone. And I'm really trying to make a difference in my daughter's life. So then we get to the next question, hey, have you ever used drugs before? What does that look like for you in your life? And I'm sitting there and I'm like, there's lying and there's job suicide, right? And so I told them, I said, hey, I've had a problem with drugs before. And I'm really looking to turn around my life. But little did they know that was like within the week, because I'd use, try and get sober, self-detox, end up using. I was going through that vicious cycle throughout that EMT class while trying to stay informed. It's not an easy class. And he goes, okay, well, I don't know what we could do. So he calls up HR and he's talking to HR, and the lady's like, I could hear her just frustrated, because she's got to do all this paperwork to try and hire me. And so he jumps off the phone with her and he looks at me and says, hey, this is the deal. I'm going to give you an opportunity here, but the minute you quit, you're gone. You're done. You don't have the same leniency as anyone else. We don't have time for it. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is it. This is my shot, right? Mm-hmm. And so I jump in my car and I'm excited, and I call my mom, and I'll never forget this, telling my mom, like, hey, I got hired on with the fire department. And she kind of sighs, And she goes, well, we'll see how long that lasts. I was just in jail 6 months ago, not even 4 months ago, just in jail.
And you had used that week. Yeah.
Yeah. And I used that week. And so that excitement kind of settled in of like, how am I going to be clean for this? Not only how am I going to piss clean for this, I am physically not in shape. Like the most I ever ran was on the wrestling team in high school for 2 miles. And these guys are running 7, 8, 9, 10 miles. They're carrying 45-pound packs with them, for PT hikes 2-3 hours at a time. And that's just a warm up for the job. You're hiking into a fire 2-3 miles with your pack and then carrying that pack all day for 16 hours straight, fighting fire up and down a hill, and then hiking back, sleeping in the dirt, and then doing it all over again. And so the nerves set in. And I remember just thinking to myself, Brennan, this is an opportunity of a lifetime. And so I show up Monday. I do what's called the pack test. It's a 3-mile, 45-pound pack test for 45. You got to do it in under 45 minutes. And then the rest of the crew had already done it since I was a late hire. So it's me and one other gentleman. And we're going, I'm hiking around this trail and doing laps. And he's like, hey man, you got to pick it up. Like if you don't pick it up, you're not going to make it. And so I've never felt such physical pain in my life. I've broken ribs, fingers, had my nose broke, some pretty painful stuff, but I've never been in such agony and just snot dripping and just teary eyed and just ears are itching and shin splints. And I'm like, I got to do this. I got to do this for my daughter. I got to prove everyone wrong that said I wouldn't amount to nothing. And so I get done at like 44 minutes and 50 seconds.
Oh, wow.
And so I fall down, Mike, and I can't even pull off this vest. And so Clayton helps me pull off this vest. He's like, hey man, I'm just trying to give you a heads up. Like, that's going to be the easiest thing you do in this job. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
Today was an easy day.
Yeah. All the while I'm detoxing. I've probably got multiple drugs in my system. And so I'm trying to stay as hydrated as possible. So I go take my UA and I finish out the day and I go home and I'm asleep by like, 6 p.m. I'm asleep. I'm so physically exhausted. I'm asleep and I wake up and I show up for the next day. And I kept doing that day after day. And, you come from the service work. And so there's quite a bit of rookie camaraderie, right? We'll call it that for the listeners and viewers. And so I'm taking that and I'm just trying to put my head down and be unseen and just show up and put the work in. And I'm always dead last, right? But I'm not quitting. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, I'm done quitting on myself. But what was interesting for myself and so many others that kind of hear my story is that I didn't understand what recovery meant. And so I left drugs behind at that point in time. Cold turkey. I never attended a meeting, counseling, maybe as a young kid, but so it was this like weird moment for me that this sense of purpose had given me the ability of being a young father to quit. And so I went on for 2.5 years to fight fires all over the country and to rebuild my life and restore the things that I had broken and relationships and, just everything, the wreckage that we cause, and I remember the arresting officer running into him, probably about a year after I got hired, and we chatted and he was like, man, I'm impressed. Like, all I have to tell you, I'm impressed, and I didn't think you could do it, but thank you for doing it. Thanks for restoring that hope, that people can recover and they can make a difference. And so, life is going extremely well, and kind of like how you talked about initially, June 30th, 2013, we go to a fire, but I'm separated from my crew because I'm a lookout. And just through some freak weather events, we're starting to watch homes burn, and it's just a rapid change throughout the day. And my crew gets trapped. And I hear this over the radio, and it's just gut wrenching. It's just full on, I'm in shock. Like these men had saved my life, and I looked up to them so much, and they had so much experience on that crew, and I couldn't seem to wrap my head around it. And then I'm waiting. We're trying to get to them, and we can't. There's too much fire on the ground. They're too far back in, and they're putting helicopters up, and they couldn't drop water, and there's just so many things that went wrong that day. And finally they land a DPS helicopter with a paramedic, and he's hiking down, and the community is still burning. We're still losing homes at this time. I remember hearing over the radio, he says, I've got 19 confirmed. And for a split second, Michael, I'm thinking to myself, I told you there was 19 guys. I told you who had a chainsaw, who had a tool. And it hit me that 19 of my brothers had just passed. And instantly just this depth of sadness, that took me back to like some deep childhood trauma. I hadn't experienced anything like that in my life. The closest thing I'd experienced is, my dad leaving at 2, which I don't remember, and my mom just been out of my life, right? And so I just break down and I'm crying. And I'm sitting there going, God, like, why am I here? Like, please don't let this be true. Please don't let this be true. And as the moments go on, they're starting to try and inform families, and, media is on their way up to try and cover this story, and, words getting out of what has happened. And I'm sitting there all alone. There's other firefighters on this fire, right? But I don't know them as intimately as I knew my brothers. They're trying to comfort me, and just every range of emotion, just anger, depression, guilt, shame just kicked in, and I'm in shock. And they talk about that shock. And I go to the middle school that night where the families are meeting, and I was supposed to go home, but I didn't want to go home. One of my roommates had just passed. I didn't want to go home. I go to this high school, and I walk in this auditorium, and I remember seeing just the faces, and it wasn't disappointment that I had lived, but it was just the confirmation that their loved one had passed. And that guilt would walk with me for years. I would attend numerous funerals for my brothers all over the country, memorials, fundraisers. I would experience things in my life that people shouldn't have to experience. And though I didn't turn back to heroin, I found comfort in a bottle of booze. I was binge drinking and, suicidal, in constant depression, and I thought the shock would go away. And that shock stood around for months. And I started to begin to build these deeply negative beliefs and coping skills, because I'm in this limelight doing interviews. I'm talking with people. I can't go within my community without being recognized. And so, they're trying to honor them by remembering them. And it's just a trigger for me. And I'm thank you so much for that. But for me, it's just another visual of what happened that day and unfolded. And so I go home, or I go to the bars, and I just drink myself to sleep. I'd get in fights, get in arguments with officers. Like, this wasn't me. Like, this wasn't who I was before, but it had radically changed my life, and it had taken over. And so for years I suffered, because early on, I didn't know what recovery was. I was just abstinent from drugs, right? I didn't go through a program. I didn't work the steps. I didn't find my higher power. I just found a job that saved my life. And now that was gone, I was back to square one.
Yeah. So after that happened, I mean, obviously we know the end of the story, or where you're at right now, but what was it that led to? So at some point you're going to bars, you're getting drunk so you can sleep, you're getting into fights. you're having discussions with or interactions with police officers again, and you knew this wasn't you. So what happened from there? How did you get from that point to where you are now?
I found myself, this pastor kept checking in with me throughout this whole time and kept, seeing how I was doing and kept meeting for breakfast. And he started this recovery Bible study. And I remember he kept inviting me, and he's like, hey, there's other guys that are trying to get sober like you, and I think you could be helpful. And, I'm like, all right, I'll show up, just show up once and then you don't have to go back again. A lot of those men in that Bible study, weren't believers. They were at treatment centers. And so the pastor had built relationships to be able to offer this to them and have dinner with them and talk with them and just really have a really solid meeting. And I remember hearing these stories of these men in there that were struggling with addiction, but had sobriety like I had never had before. They had a peace about themselves that I had never had before. And mind you, I had written a book. The movie's due to come out in like 6 to 9 months. I had a home. I had a truck. I had my bills paid. I had a fiance. I had kids. So the outside looking in looks great, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the internal is just dead. And I find myself in my truck after that meeting. And I remember just that foxhole prayer, right? God, if you change this, if you can remove this, I will do this. I will serve addicts for the rest of my life. As long as I have the opportunity, I will serve addicts. And so I kept showing up to that meeting every Wednesday. I kept praying that same prayer every day. And I continued to deepen that relationship with God and find purpose and healing and forgiveness within that fellowship. And I started getting invited into the 12-step community, right? And that was a whole nother resource for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was addressing my trauma, and I'm looking at my PTSD, and I'm watching myself transform, not overnight, but fairly quick, fairly quick. And I'm going, there's something to this. There's something to recovering, understanding where this disease lies. And so I pick up like 6 months, and I'm going on movie premieres. I'm all over the country, but I've got these men back at home that are checking in. Hey, Brennan, how you doing? What's going on? What, you doing well? Because I'm staying at hotels, and there's a bar, there's a mini fridge.
Yeah, you're in another town. And nobody there to watch you. Nobody
knows, but someone did. And so you had talked about my superintendent being in recovery, and the actor who played him, Josh Brolin, is in recovery as well.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So Josh knew my struggles, and so he'd check in with me every day. He said, hey man, how you feeling? You doing okay? I know it's a lot to take in, just super compassionate. So not only do I have a lot of support, because even the people in the film, they witnessed some of these drunken encounters that I had. You spend enough time with somebody, you spend 2 years working on a film, they're going to get a glimpse into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had these support systems on both ends, not only where I was traveling, but back home with people that loved me. And I hadn't felt that since I was on the crew. And I found brothers in recovery. I found brothers in a relationship with God. And it was shortly after the movie had premiered that I felt like I was called to open a Christian treatment center. And I'm like, what? Like, I'm a knuckle dragging hotshot, right? I don't know degrees. I don't know business. But God just kept putting the right people in my life. And from the time that I put pen to paper, the time we opened was 9 months. I mean, it was quick. It was from the time the business plan was written to the time the doors were open was 9 months. And so, like, that's what leads me today to where I'm in, and how we connected, right? Is like,
yeah,
just getting out there and having this conversation of addiction and trauma and loss, and what does recovery look like? And it looks different for so many people, but we find that commonality within the fellowship.
Yeah. So when you say that you felt called. How did you know? How did you know that this was your calling? Because it just seems like it just came to you that you needed to open up this treatment center, and you were even surprised. Like, wait a minute, is this my higher power? This is my calling, really? So, how did that come to you? How did you get that feeling?
I had seen a need for a Christian treatment center specifically in our community. Prescott's been known for recovery and good and bad. And, today I can say that the recovery community here is really solid. And over the last 4 years, it's really changed and become dynamic. And, I think kind of one of the ways that I felt that I needed to do this, and I knew why and how, was when I started praying, and I'm like, God, I don't have the resources or the tools to do this. Like, this is a huge hurdle for me to overcome. It wasn't like I had, money at disposal to gain a facility, to hire staff, to go through the insurance. I knew nothing about it. I knew nothing about levels of care. And
you weren't a licensed counselor, none of that. I mean, you didn't have the educational background for it. As far as recovery was concerned, on the educational side.
But people were put in my life very quick that had worked for programs or have helped build programs and say, hey, I believe in what you're doing and I want to be a part of this. And so it happened really fast, the program piece and, learning about the different ins and outs of this business industry and picking up some great mentors throughout the time frame allowed me to be able to open this place. And, we've been open for almost 3 years this summer. So I've obviously learned a tremendous amount from the top to the bottom. I've worked almost every position right in this company and have contact with all of our employees and really have just a deep understanding of what they're doing from the level that I can. But that's why I felt so fortunate to have the professionals that come in and say, hey, I know counseling and I know what this looks like and I know what we need to do to provide them the healing that they need to live a long time of sobriety and to have happiness and joy and to walk through tough times and stay sober. And so it's been amazing, to watch that, to witness it, to be a part of it, to play a small role in it. And I'm continuing to learn too, and that's a big piece for me. And I think you could relate to this.
Oh, yeah.
In any kind of service to others, it's, hey, remain teachable, remain a sponge. Don't stop learning, because the minute you stop learning is the minute someone's going to get hurt. So I'm always trying to connect with people and learn and share and really see how, because even in the last 5 years in the first responder community, PTSD has completely changed. The way it's looked at, the way it's treated, even with an addiction. A lot of, trauma therapy wasn't included, up until quite a few years ago. It was offered at certain places, but it didn't have such a heavy focus. So it's so amazing to see like programs just continually growing and trying to meet the needs of those who are suffering.
Yeah, just even on the counseling side, I mean, there's a lot of studies out now that are really changing just the face-to-face counseling in the approaches that are used as well. I just know in my time in recovery, about 9.5 years, there's been a lot of changes. And so that's fantastic. You guys have been open about 3 years now. Is this focused on the first responder community, or is it the public, maybe the public with a group of first responders, or what's your approach in that regard?
Yeah, so everyone's integrated in our program, but they have an individualized treatment plan. And so first responders are integrated with civilians. And for me, that was one of the biggest hurdles I had, was opening up to civilians about my trauma. But that's where I found my sobriety, is, walking alongside God with men. And maybe didn't walk in my shoes, but who can say we've all walked in the same shoes, right?
Right.
Maybe the same brand, I've worn a pair of Nikes before, but, all of our journeys have been so unique, but not unique, right? And we found that integration to really work well here. But certain clients need, more trauma therapy. Certain clients need more family work. Certain clients need a combination of both. And so we walk alongside them and through our long term, we've got a 45-day track, a 90-day track, and then they can even extend with us longer for our extended care program.
Right. Well, I found, and I'm sure that you found as well, because of as we said in the beginning of this podcast, the stigma that's associated with addiction, and that's one of the areas where I'm working hard to educate the public so there isn't as much stigma. And with first responders, military, certainly my world, the police world and the FBI world, and all the other federal agencies, I'm here in the Washington, D.C. area, so a lot of the folks I work with are in the alphabet soup of agencies, and there's a lot of stigma associated with it. And early on, I always get, hey, look, I only want to be around my own. I only want to be around other FBI agents or State Department folks or firefighters or police officers. And that's where people come in. And that was where I was, when I first came into recovery as well. Just because that we have our own concept in our mind as to, people that have addictions, who they are and what they are. And in time, if people get time in recovery like I did, you start to realize, no, wait a minute. No, addiction's an equal opportunity destroyer. And everybody, we're all equal in this. And no, I have my brothers and my brothers and sisters in my profession. This is a different animal. And I need to get out of my I can't just be around the people that I work with. I have to go out into the community because we can help people in the community and they can help us. But there's just it's just such a closed off community because of the nature of the work. And I'll tell you, in the last year, it's actually gotten worse just because I know a lot of people in the law enforcement community feel like the public has turned on them. So it's just, they're just not wanting to exhibit more chinks in the armor, so to speak. And it's become very, very difficult. So I'm glad to hear that you're encouraging, first responders to get out and not just become so focused on the job. Because frankly, I don't think that's healthy. I think you have to get outside. I found I help myself the more, or the less time, I should say, that I spent associating with other first responders and really kind of normalizing everyone else, because you just start, when you're a first responder, you start, particularly in law enforcement, when you're dealing with people that have problems, right? When you're a police officer, people aren't calling you because they're having a good day. They're calling you because you have a bad day. And when you do that, every hour on the hour, and that's all you do, and you do that for 20 plus years, you start to think that everybody's got problems. Well, not everybody does. You know what I mean? So it's good.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. I think there's a time and place for it too, right? And I think, there's some amazing work that, some of the first responders groups are doing within peer support. And, I know there's starting to become some treatment facilities that are union backed that are hosting that specific population. And, I feel like that's important too for some of those that are out there. But for those that are willing, it's like, hey, this is a pretty rad opportunity. And, because there is that brotherhood and sisterhood, there really is. But I know for me, I've found brothers and sisters in recovery as well that may not have the same badge or the same title, but we all suffer from that same disease. And so they've, really stepped in my life and been a part of it in a positive mindset. So I think if any encouragement, I think both of us are trying to give to people, it's like, hey, I know it's a lot to step out of your comfort zone to even say, to be a first responder and say, I need help, but just to even take it a step further and be open to that process, and you'll be surprised at how people receive it.
Oh yeah, that was absolutely my case. Now, circling back on something that you had said, so you have pre-fire service, and then when it came to getting sober, and then post fire service, and then it sounds like pre-fire service, you had not been exposed to meetings, you had not been exposed to recovery per se, no treatment center, nothing like that, and then it was handled differently afterwards. And you kind of paint the picture for something that I've been talking about on this podcast for quite some time, and that is this: that not using and being sober are two separate concepts. Meaning, I know what happens is, when people don't have direction in their life, when people don't have discipline in their life, when they don't have hope, when they don't have something to strive for, because that's something that I discovered in my own walk, and it sounds like you had the same thing, is I found when I got into recovery that I always had to have something. It helped me mentally. It helped me in sobriety to always have a goal that I'm shooting for. Whether, when I first got into recovery, I got into running and triathlon and cycling, and then worked on another college degree. But so I was always reaching for like the next level and the next thing. But when I was drinking, all of that was gone away. It was like I was just floundering in life. So what happened, and it sounds like to me, what I'm hearing from you is the fire service was that. It gave you something to work towards. But the problem is, because you're not working on that trauma, you're not working on the causes, right? Causes and conditions. What's causing you to use in the first place? So when this thing was taken from you, or you removed it from your life, however it happens, then you're back to where you were. And we have a saying in recovery, and that is that the same person will use again. So you hadn't worked on that. You had that goal, and then the goal went away. And then because you hadn't worked on sobriety, quote unquote sobriety, then you went back. And this is the next thing I wanted to point out was, folks that are listening, addiction is addiction is addiction. If you're using heroin, you can't safely go and drink. And if you drink, you can't safely go and use heroin. this is addiction. And I think that we can't stovepipe addictions, right? So my primary drug of choice was alcohol. And I know enough about recovery. I got no business using anything else that's mood altering. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And that was the concept I was trapped in, right? Before I actually worked on my sobriety, was like, well, I'm not using drugs. It's legal. It's alcohol. What's wrong with it? Until I found out what true sobriety was. And it's rang true for me, and even if it could, I don't want to. I don't want it. My life is so much better.
Yeah.
My life is amazing, and I know I can't, but it's even the legal substances are still mind altering. They still have the side effects. They still have the damage that they cause. And for me, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it at all. I love my life today. I've loved the past 4 years of sobriety and what I get to do, and I wouldn't, trade that for the world. And it's made me a better father. It's made me a better husband. It's made me a better human being. And I those are things that you can't buy. Those aren't, I wouldn't trade it for nothing.
No. And it sounds like that you came to the same conclusion that I did, and that is that when you are saved from your addiction, which is certain death, it's just a different kind of a death. It's a slower death. That when you are saved from it, and anybody that's gotten into long-term recovery is a miracle. So you, Brendan, are a miracle. And do you not get the sense that in the tragedy that you experienced, that you were saved for a purpose, for a cause? And does that not help you stay sober every day, knowing that there was a reason why you survived that tragedy? And
wholeheartedly, it took years.
It would just be a waste to not. It would be dishonoring in a lot of ways to go back and use and do that. Do you feel that?
Completely. Oh yeah. It took me quite a while to figure out that I had purpose and there was a reason why I survived. And but I get to live that purpose out today, and I get to honor my brothers by helping others, continuing on their legacy and sharing about who they were and the impact they had on my life. Because I wouldn't be here without them. Jails, institutions, death, right?
Yep.
That's the saying, how it goes, and I believe those three things to hold true. And so, by walking through what I've walked through, it's been painful. Yeah. Do I miss them? Wholeheartedly. Do I wish the families had their loved ones? Yeah, I do. I do so much for that to happen, but today that's not the reality, but I've seen so much growth out of it. I've seen so much beauty. I've seen so much healing, and I want to continue to push forward with that so that 20 years from now, they're still being remembered. And that tragedy, as unfortunate and as sad as it is, and how much I miss them daily, I'm paying it forward because of the sacrifice that they made for others.
And when you have that, and when you're working towards that sort of a goal, And part of your sobriety is honoring others and knowing that others count on you and look to you. It helps you. I know in my own case, and I'm sure that this applied to you as well. I've in sobriety, I've traveled quite a bit, been in hotel rooms and been overseas, been in hotel rooms overseas. I've been to countries in Eastern Europe where I think vodka is probably more prevalent than water, and stayed sober. And I remember in my mind being in one particular country, sitting in the hotel room, and being by myself, and I thought, I could drink right now. I could. Who would know? Who would know? I could drink. But by then I had enough sobriety behind me to know that, number one, it wouldn't just be on that trip. There's just no way. I knew me, and I knew that would just set off a disastrous progression again. And the second thing that kept hitting me is, no, there's too many people to count on me. By then I'm sponsoring, men in my chosen recovery program, my wife, my mother, people. There were people that were back here. I do this podcast, for goodness sake. I go out, like you, I go out in the public and I talk about sobriety, and I talk about the benefits of sobriety, and I talk about all these different things. And I could not, with a straight face, come back to the United States and get on this podcast or get in front of the public and talk about the benefits of sobriety, knowing that in that one instance I went overseas and just said, you know what, I'm going to let my hair down and do what I'm going to do when I'm over here. I couldn't do that. So I think for our listeners, you've got to find that purpose. You've got to find your higher power. You've got to work the program. You've got to deal with the trauma and have a reason to not drink, and it's going to be different for each person, isn't it? So for me, that was the logic I used when I was in that hotel room. It was, okay, on one hand, nobody would know that I relapsed, but on the other hand, I could never live with myself knowing that I had let all these people down. And that's kind of the mental game that you play with yourself. But for me, it worked. Do you do the same thing?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think for me, the statement of like Pringles, right? Once you pop the top, you can't stop.
That's right.
It's not a one and done, right? Like that's not how I'm full bore. Like that's why I'm an addict, right? I've been 110% in. And so that piece I know to be true. And all the people that do count on you, and I think we could put pressure on ourselves too, but it's a healthy sense of responsibility, right? And and I think there comes a lot of responsibility, but also a lot of pride that comes in knowing that people are accountable to us and we're accountable to others.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so important to have that, and that purpose. We talk about purpose, and it's like that purpose rings true. And, everyone has a purpose on this earth wholeheartedly. I believe that completely. And we've got to stay focused on that purpose and be willing to walk through some good and bad times to get to that purpose, but it's all worth it. I'd trade. Yeah. I'd never go back. There's no point.
Yeah, no. And everybody, like you mentioned, everybody has a purpose. And if you're listening to us right now, you have a purpose on planet Earth. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, not one of us knows whether we're going to be alive or dead tomorrow. Not one of us knows that. And I know that sounds kind of morbid, but it's the truth. You don't know how many days you have left on Earth. And it is up to you to utilize every minute you have on Earth to the best of your ability and find out what your purpose is. And your purpose is to serve other people and help them on their journey while on planet Earth. I mean, that has been my purpose, and it sounds like it's your purpose as well. And by using and drugging, we are squandering that time to do what we're called to do. And it sounds like you discovered what I discovered, and millions of other people in recovery have discovered, is that one of the secrets of recovery is working with other people and helping other people stay sober and get well. And the funny thing is that as long as we are helping other people, we tend to stay well ourselves because we're focused on the other person. And that sounds like that's a discovery you've made as well.
Yeah, having that connection, when we step out of self, it's huge. It's talked about in so many different recovery platforms, of stepping out of self. And I think it's so important because at some point in time, it's bigger than us.
When you I know that you stay in touch with many of the actors that were in the movie. Again, the movie was Only the Brave. Do you talk about these things? Do you talk about recovery issues? Like you mentioned how Josh Brolin is in recovery. I mean, is this something that how often do you talk to him and talk about recovery related matters?
I would say, I mean, that's a pretty personal relationship, but yeah,
Sure.
I reach out to them quite often and just check in and see how they're doing. And, if I see something they've got, or if they see a post on social media, they'll hey, beautiful Christmas photo and stuff. So we stay in contact quite a bit, and they live busy lives and so do I.
Yeah.
But, everyone involved in that film was so kind and so heartfelt and went above and beyond. And, those are things you don't forget, especially in an industry like that. I mean, there's not one person I ran into during that entire process that I felt like, man, they're just not a nice person.
Yeah.
Always, even the cooks, everybody, right? And so it was just a really cathartic process to go through that. But then to have people that are supportive, and then to have relationships today, it just speaks to who they are as people, just that they love people just like anybody else. And, it's quite amazing to see, that, cause you have this picture, right, of people who are famous that are, above then or anything like that. And that's the last thing that I found, that's the last thing that I found. And so I'm fortunate for that. And that might not be the experience for everybody, but with the men and women that I met, I've got nothing but great things to say. And, every once in a while I'll get a message or an email from somebody and, hey, I just watched the film for another time, or, I just want to say thank you so much for the experience. And I'm so grateful that they put so much passion and their heart into it, because it meant so much.
It's funny that it's something that hit me. And that was, by the way, and that's really what I was getting at with the movie and your relationships with these folks. Because I understand that, those are personal relationships that you have. And I think what I was getting at was more, was this kind of a one and done? They came in, did the movie and left, and you never heard from them again? Or are these people that truly did take an interest in what happened? And it sounds like they really have, which is fantastic.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I mean, like I said, everyone's life's busy and things like that, but I know I could pick up the phone and call and check in and see how they're doing, and vice versa. I hear from them, pretty often. And, so yeah, that was probably the most, because you have that feeling, right? It's like, is this going to be a one and done deal? Like, is this because of the job they have at hand?
Right.
And that's far from the truth for them.
Well, that's great to hear. And I'll tell you, so I watched the movie, and I'm maybe like you in this regard, that if you're a first responder, I know prior to going into law enforcement, and those of you that are listening, if you've never heard me before, so my background, I was a helicopter pilot in the Navy, then corrections, then a police officer, and then an FBI agent for an entire career. And prior to those careers, I would watch every police movie, every military movie that I could get my hands on. Because that's what I always wanted to do. Once I started doing the job, however, particularly being a police officer and then later as an FBI agent, I could never watch a movie. Somebody would say, hey, did you see this movie about the FBI? Did you see this movie about this police department over here? You should watch it. It's a really good movie. And I never did. So for 20 plus years, I never watched any movie that had anything to do with any first responder or the military, because it was just so unrealistic, because I knew the lifestyle, I knew the life, and I knew that what I saw in the movie just was not an accurate depiction at all of what I was experiencing every day. So when I watched this movie, Only the Brave, I went into it with sort of that mindset of, oh, this is going to be, it's going to be Hollywoodized. It's going to be over the top. It's not going to be realistic. But I got to tell you, I really sensed what you mentioned, and that is that the actors and actresses that were in this movie took this to heart and did a really good job of trying to portray what it would really be like on the job in the interactions. I thought they did a good job of, getting the banter, getting, how first responders treat one another and how they react to certain things. And I did not find myself shying away going, oh, that's fake. That's not how it would really be. I really felt like they embraced this and portrayed it fairly, what my experiences on the job has been. Is that how you felt?
Yeah, wholeheartedly. I think they did an amazing job. And, there was a boot camp before we started filming, so all the actors went through a boot camp and they cut line and dug line and slept in the dirt and, learned about fire behavior and had to break in boots. They didn't get, it wasn't like a knockoff boots. These are real gear they're wearing that's weighed down, right? This isn't, we'll get them these boots because they'll look the same. No one will know the difference. But these are boots that I spent many painful hikes in breaking in, and so they really took it serious and learned the profession and learned the family interactions and met with a lot of the families and had that time. So and I feel like Hollywood's done, some great movies that are out there that they've really taken a serious look at it, like, hey, how do we really capture a realistic look into this? Because we want to protect those stories. And I think, I've seen some phenomenal stories that have been told through the eyes of film. And don't get me wrong, like nothing's perfect in life, but they had the heart and passion, and that shows. That means a lot.
Yeah, I definitely got that sense. And so if you're listening and you've not seen the movie, you got to check it out. It's Only the Brave, put out by Columbia Pictures. And it was really good. It was really good.
Yeah.
And I thought it was very, I'm sorry?
Sony Pictures, but yeah, Only the Brave. Yep. Sony
Pictures, Only the Brave. And it's worth checking out. It really is. And so with that, Brendan, tell our listeners, how can they get hold of you, how they can get hold of your organization, and if they want to check out your center out there in Arizona, how would they do that?
Yeah, so Holdfast Recovery, www.holdfastrecovery.com. Our phone number is 1-800-351-6858.
Okay, fantastic. And again, it's Brendan McDonough. And we'll go ahead and wrap up with this. I really appreciate you joining us today. I really do appreciate the story, and I just think you're doing a phenomenal honor, for your brothers, and just carrying on their memory and doing great work for the community. And I'm sure all those guys would be proud of you. So as always, I'd like to say,
Michael, I appreciate it.
Oh no, thank you. Thank you. And as I'd like to say, I don't represent any group. I don't represent anyone other than myself. And the same is true of Brandon. My only purpose in giving this information is to share with you what I've done, because it's helped me and maybe it'll help you. So if I've said anything that does not apply to you or you don't agree with, or Brendan said that you don't agree with, then just discard it. But try to take any information that you can use for yourself and to help others as well, because that's what we do in recovery. We help ourselves along the way, and we help to impart the knowledge we've gained to others as well. So with that, please visit our Facebook page, which is Recovery is Possible, and our website, which is VanMeterWellnessSolutions.com, and let me know how I'm doing, and let me know if there's a topic you're interested in hearing, and because I'd love to hear from you. And take care, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much.